one of the documents that you have downloaded is the change management document, the change request form. Yes or no? Now, change request form can be an Excel spreadsheet. It can also be a Word document. Like this. Alright, either or, if you notice that the information on both documents is pretty much the same. What is it? When you have a change, right? And of course, I want all of you to go through the recording. What did we say? We want to capture who is requesting the change, right? Their information. What do they want to change? Why are they requesting this change? What are the benefits of making this change? What is the risk if we don't make this change? We will list all of their thoughts. Is there any other alternative? Can we do something, right? Is there a workaround that we can apply, that we can apply without making this change, right? Why? Because when we make a change, we are resetting the clock, right? We are resetting our budget. So we are not going to be delivering on the original delivery date, are we? Now, once we know what is the impact to our if we don't implement this change, then how is our business process or how is our, project going to suffer, right? The solution. However, Section 3 is talking about how does it impact the project, meaning to say, does it mean that it needs more resources, right? Does it mean that my timeline will be affected? So I will, if I am the project manager, I will have to list what is my analysis on my project success criteria. And once I have listed, my timeline will have to be shifted by 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it is, or I'll have to buy a new server, we'll have to hire more resources. Then I must put down what is the cost estimate, right? The actual cost. So I've said my cost will go up. Now I've got to put down an estimate on the cost, or if it's going to take me more time, right? If it's also going to impact other projects. Are you clear? And as a project manager, what is it that I recommend? Do I recommend making this change or not? Section 4. What did I say, guys? Section 4. You should fill out what are the details of the change. Something else that I mentioned was there are some companies where you can, right, this change document serves as the documentation of the change, right? So it's not just a change request, but you also find the documentation, the details of the change. If that's the case, you should have the details here in this section. Some companies, they don't have the details here. They just reference the change here. And then you must list the document that somebody must refer to, right? It can be an appendices, it can be another change, a document. Whatever it is, they must refer to that document to get more details on the change. If that's the case, you must list that here. There are other companies which ask you to update your requirements document after the change has been approved. Again, if that is the case, you must refer to the revised version of the requirements document that must be referred to by the different stakeholders to get more details of the change. Is everyone clear so far? Okay? Guys, give me just 1 minute. Sorry about that, guys. This is a friend who is, who has a 10-year-old who just had a bone marrow transplant, and I did one of the bone marrow drives for her. But her son was diagnosed with blood cancer when he was 3 years old, and he just had a bone marrow transplant. And I didn't want to, let her phone call go into voicemail. So, right. So where were we? So we were talking about, yeah, I know, Nihal, there's, there's stuff that you must do beyond, how do I say it? We just can't be so selfish, right? We've got to think of others too. I don't want her, she's by herself in this, she came to Houston for the marrow transplant. She's by herself, and her husband does come to visit, but, he has a job too. But it is difficult, right? Srinivas, it's not something I did. Actually, all of us should be doing it, right? We must give back as well, not only simply because this is a friend of ours, but in general too. We are just, all of us, we are just plain lucky. We don't realize it, but we are lucky to be healthy and to not have such issues, right? And if there is something that we can do, it's something, sometimes I just feel, you will not believe it, and I know I'm deviating from this, from our class here, but nowadays science has progressed so much that you can actually do a marrow, donate marrow by just giving blood. It is a simple blood, they connect some tubes to your arm, and they have a machine that it's kind of a washing machine. And in our blood, they figured out there are certain cells that if they transplant that cells into the, to the patient's body, then those cells convert into marrow cells. All right. So they just wash those cells and take those from your blood and put it in the patient's body. Right. So it's so simple nowadays. It's not the olden method, method where you need to do a spinal tap and they drill into your bone to get your bone marrow. It has become so simplified. But 2 months ago, when we were doing this drive, they actually found 6 donors, right, who were 100% matched. You will not believe it. All 6 denied. They refused to donate marrow. So eventually, the mom, and this is something, right? The moms and the mother and the parents basically, and his immediate family, none of them can donate because none of them have the exact match as him. You can't, because we inherit 23 chromosomes from our mom, 23 from our dad. And of those, we get 5 antigens from mom, 5 antigens from the dad. So he has this unique combination. Everyone, each one of us, we have this unique combination of 10 antigens. So nobody in our immediate family will have the exact same match unless you have a brother or sister, right? Only a sibling will have the exact same match of antigens as yourself. So they have to rely on a total stranger to be able to donate, and all the 6 people who were 100% matched, they refused, which is heartbreaking, right? As a mom, as a child, think of it. A 10-year-old who has been forced to think that he may not live beyond this year. Can you imagine how traumatic that is? We try to give our children, right? That is hope, right? So as a parent, it is heartbreaking, but as a child too, I've heard him talk to my daughter and say he's really mad at the world, he's really mad at God, that why is it that he can't live and everyone else can live. That is, you hear that, it's really heartbreaking. And my daughter came away, she was in tears too. She says, "Mommy, why does Ketan have to die?" And I said, "No, you'll save him." But it is difficult, guys. We all must do what we can to help. I mean, I just feel all of us, we're so selfish, right? And especially, I don't know about anybody else, but those of you are aware, right? When we die, we cremate our bodies, right? All with it, all the organs and everything. Who cares if the liver was cremated or not? Can I not give away my liver and my heart and my, my brain or whatever it is, anything that can be used? If you're going to burn it anyways, right? It's going to turn into ashes. Might as well give it away. Maybe it will save somebody else's life. So it's just become a cause with me. It's something that it's worth fighting for, right? We should be able to save our kids at the very least, or at least our loved ones. I'm not saying save a 90-year-old, right? They have pretty much lived their life. But come on, right? Kids and people dying at 20 and 30. Things that we can help with. Small stuff. We don't need 2 kidneys. We can do with 1, right? Anyways, any of you who have not registered for, and would be interested, guys, for marrow, it is a pain-free process. It's not as complicated as before. Do find out, even for you to donate marrow, you will have to take some 3 injections per day, because we need, right, even if we donate some of those cells, like I mentioned, we need some for ourselves too, right? So they gave us injections so that that cell multiplication, cell multiplies. So there's enough for you to donate and enough for you to retain. They can't take 100% out of your bloodstream, right? So they give you those shots so that you can have enough, those cells multiply, and then after 3 days, you donate the blood, they'll wash those cells, and that's pretty much it, okay? So the pain is really for getting those, those 3 shots that you take, right, on a daily basis. 3 shots, pretty much, 1 shot per day, right? But as compared to, think of it, you save a life. So find out if you are not registered yet, and if you would like to. It's something very simple, right? There's so many things that we can save. We don't realize, right, when we go to the hospital, when we hear of somebody and we say, oh, we'll just buy blood. We don't realize that we're buying blood, but somebody else donated it, really, right? And, yes, it doesn't hurt us, right? So, okay. So back to where we were. Once we have listed the documents that where do you find all these the change details? Oh boy, is there something? Neha, we just have 3 people on the call now. We have Srinivas, Nehal, and Trishma. What happened to the others? I know Shadab said that he would have to drop off at 9 Pacific. Is it 9 Pacific? I thought it is still 7 his 8 or 8 his time, right? Alright, never mind. Guys, do you hear me? Guys, do you hear me? Could you unmute yourself?
Yes.
Okay. All right. For a minute, I thought maybe none of you can hear me. All right. And you are able to see my screen, right?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So once you have listed all this information, then you get your signatures. As I also mentioned that when we have the, did I also talk to you how there's a board that approves this change request? That's right. So once we fill out this form, we must socialize it, right? And then we must submit it to the change control board. The change control board will review, that's right. The change control board reviews the changes, and then there is a voting process. Now in that voting process, before the voting process, there is a chance given to the requester to present his case, right? They can talk about the change request, and then everybody in the change control meeting, and some of them who are eligible to vote, will vote on whether this is worth changing or not. If they vote yes, then even people who did not want to go through with this change, who are not supporters of this change, they must sign off, okay, because it has been approved by the board. So it applies. All right? They can't just say, all right, I'm not going to sign off on it. I don't agree with it. Okay? The board has made a decision, so if it is approved, it is approved. Now, this document also serves as a process of communication. So none of these stakeholders can come back and say, wait a minute, I did not know this change was happening. I did not agree to this being changed. I did not agree to, or I thought something else. I thought this, their interpretation is different than yours. So this is what is written. This is what we are changing to. This is the impact. Everything is listed here, so it serves as an official document that, hey, this is what we presented, this is what we approved, that was approved, right? 2, that yes, because it was approved or because you signed off on it, and these are the details, this is the change that we are making, nothing else. All right, is that clear to everyone? Now, if you scroll down, you have all the approvals, and that's pretty much it. Okay? So the template per se is not the one that is important, guys. It is the process. It does not matter if the fields are exactly the same or not. They are pretty much the same if you notice. Right? First you're saying yes or no. Right? Impact on cost, impact on schedule. Aren't these the exact same thing that we had on our other Excel document? Yes? So don't stick to any particular template. You should know the logical progression. All right? Okay. So with this, we are going to move on to the topic of the day. As I mentioned, we will discuss use cases. Right? What are use cases? Well, let me ask you this. So, Trishma, if you were to help, right, your mom or your aunt, if you were to give them directions on how to log in over the phone, right, how would you explain, how would you walk them through the login process? Can you explain it to me?
First, open the browser and type the site name, and then you will find a login button. So type your username and password, and then
on the login button.
No, there is a what do you call space after a login sign and password sign. So
no, how do you get to that page? Trishma, how do you get to that page?
Once you type in the site website name.
Okay, hold on.
Domain name.
Let me do it.
Sure.
So let's say here. So I typed in my browser name, right?
Yeah, but I can't see your screen.
Okay.
Yeah,
so I typed in the browser name.
Yeah.
And I am going to
click on.
What am I? I don't see username, password right here. I see the sign in button, but what do I?
Click on sign in button.
Okay, so you forgot the click before, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so I click on the sign in button. Now what?
On your email, type your email address.
Okay.
Then type your password.
I wanted to make a point that you must right. Go ahead.
Then type your password. Once you type your password, just click on sign in button.
Okay. Then what will happen?
Then you will be signed in your account.
Okay. Very nice. Now what you just described, Tishma, is that how the login functionality works?
Yes.
Okay. Now let me ask you this. If we were building CyberFridge, right?
Yes.
And if I wanted to say, well, you know, the Kara will suggest a recipe. Do you think the developer will know right away how will Kara suggest a recipe? Or do you think that you will have to tell the developer how this functionality works?
We will have to tell the developer how it works.
That's right. So what are we doing? Our functional requirement, in this case, what was it? Right? Suggest a recipe, right?
Yes.
So what are we doing when we describe it for the developer? What are we doing? We are, we are treating every functional requirement as an object and telling or describing how this object works, right? Or interacts. How does the user interact with this object? Yes or no?
Yes.
So use cases, right, is what? When we apply object-oriented approach, and based on that we describe the process of how this functional requirement works. How does it work? Correct? Are you clear so far, all of you? Srinivas? Alright, so this is what we are going to work on today. When we describe the process of how a functional requirement works, it is called a use case. It is a description of the process, okay? The same way as Trishma described the login process. Now, if we had to describe the suggest a recipe process, right? How do we do it? Well, suggest a recipe can be by two ways. First is, I can ask the system to suggest a recipe based on an ingredient, correct? Keyword search. Yes or no? I want a recipe that involves eggplant, right? Give me all recipes for eggplant. I can ask the system to give me recipes based on ingredients that I have in my refrigerator, right? Both of them are correct. Yes or no, guys? Now, if I wanted to say, suggest a recipe based on keyword, then how does the process work, right? I must describe the process, correct, of how the user is going to interact with this system. Right? They must go on to this page, the home page. On the home page, they must click on the search button. When they click on the search button, system is going to display two options, right? Or suggest a recipe or whatever it is, right? They are when not search, but there will be search. There will be suggest recipe, whatnot. These are the four buttons. So the user must click on the suggest recipe, right? When he clicks on suggest recipe, there will be two options. One will be by keyword, the other one will be by items in refrigerator. If you select item on refrigerator, so if you go through the process, then the developer knows what is the process, what is he supposed to be developing for, right? This is called a use case. Will you all remember this? A use case consists of actors and their relationship. Actor, who is interacting with the system, right? So we are building a system. Anybody who interacts with the system is an actor, right? User is an actor. And because we are using the object-oriented approach, right, it uses UML. Are you clear? When we write use cases, we must also elaborate our use cases with a use case diagram. So not only are we using the object-oriented approach as proposed by UML, but we are also going to be drawing diagrams. So a use case, official definition is a collection of task-related activities describing a discrete, right, chunk of the system, discrete function or a functionality, feature of the system. Are you all clear? Another definition of a use case. It is functionality from a particular point of view. Now, when we write use cases, right, well, why do we write use cases? One, it describes the system. How does it work? Right or wrong? Two, for those of you who have done your requirements document, was there any way, did you link functional requirement 2 to functional requirement 3 or 4? Was there any linkage between functional requirements? No. So when you say that the developer must develop the sign-in button, the developer must develop the the page, sign-in page, is there any linkage there? No. Right? Is there any linkage between sign in and add items to my cart? No. So how does the developer know that in order for you to sign out, right, and go back to Amazon. I'm sure all of you have used Amazon, right? Bought from Amazon at some point of time or the other. Can you sign off without, can you buy something without signing in to your account? No. So how does the developer know that in order for you to make a purchase, you must either sign in or you must register? Is there any way for him to know? No, right? However, when I write down my use cases, correct? If I describe a system, now if I were to say, checkout process or add item to cart or let's say checkout, then part of my process is that you must be logged in. You must be signed in into your account. Yes or no, guys? Right? So what does it tell the developer? Oh, here's the link, right? You can only buy if you are signed in. Right? So system features can be correlated. You can apply the linkage. When you have links, if you cut off one link in the chain, can you tell which other features will be impacted? I have a chain, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If I remove C, then which other links in the chain are impacted? If I remove C, which ones are impacted? B and D? Yes or no? So same here. If I give you a linkage, right? Use case 1 is linked to use case 2, use case 2 is linked to use case 3. If I remove use case 2, then can you or can you not tell that the impact of removing a requirement will be that I will have to modify requirement 1 and modify requirement 3? Right? So when we have use cases, the impacts can be analyzed. All right? And lastly, you can't tell by looking at a functional requirement how easy or complex they are, can you? No. Right? You can sit down and analyze saying, is it complex? Yes, I think so. But is it truly, do you know truly for a fact? No. However, if you were to write down all the steps, right, how we did for the login process, now you have a use case that uses up 10 steps, right? You're writing down 10 steps versus a use case that has 100 steps. Can you or can you not tell which one is more complex? Yes or no? So use cases, right? When you can analyze them to understand how complex they are, how relevant, how important they are, how often are they going to be used, right? And what is the perceived value? Do we really need something this complex in our system? So you can organize. Remember, what did we say? Organization is part of analysis, right? Prioritization and classification. Yes or no? So the second bullet that you see here is what? It is the analysis, right? So not only can you analyze, if I remove a feature, then how does my entire process change, or what does it impact? But I can also analyze my requirements based on my use cases. Is everyone clear so far? Okay. Use cases are only written for functional requirements. Okay? You are not going to write use cases for non-functional requirements. So you will never write a use case on how to fill out a form so that you can buy a server. Alright? It is only written for functional requirements so that the developer knows how to build this functionality. So use cases do not describe how does a screen look like. It is for a functionality. It is not for designing. Okay? It is not for performance goals. It is not for how is the architecture, right, database going to be built. Alright? It is strictly for the functional requirement. Are you all clear so far? When we write use cases, right, there are certain key components, key sections that you must fill out. Now, what are those? A use case, right, always has a name. Why? Because if you have 20 functional requirements, if you were to write the use cases, how do I know which use case is for requirement 3? Can I tell you? If you were just to write use cases without a name, can I know, right? I need to see a name. So if you are going to describe, if you are writing down the use case for login, I need to know use case login, right? Now the ID, there can also be an ID, use case number 1. I need to know if there are 20 use cases in all or 25. So you can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 25. Remember, you can organize your use cases in any sequence. So use case number 2 could be for functional requirement number 23, right? So ID is different than use case name. It doesn't matter whether you're describing functional requirement 23 first or functional requirement 1 first, right? You could have organized them by relevance. However, I need to see the name. So the name is critical. If I don't know which process, right, which functionality you are describing, can I figure out by myself? No. Now, once you have listed the name of the functionality, right, the use case name, will the developer know? What does it mean? Maybe, sometimes we have a separate document, right? Use case document is a separate document, correct? So, anytime he sees a name, right, use case name, he'll have to go back to the requirements document and look up that name and say, okay, so what does it mean, right? For example, if we were to say, make shopping list on our use case, right? Make shopping list, if you were not to think about in terms of CAD, do you think the developer will know what does this system do? What functionality are we talking about? Yes, makes a shopping list, right? That's a system feature we want to build. But will he understand what is the concept behind make a shopping list? No. So remember how we had in our requirements traceability matrix, we listed the bullets, right? Functional requirement, and then we had the functional requirement details. Yes, no, maybe. So same here. You can have the use case name, but you must also write down a description of the use case. Correct? So that nobody has to go through, refer to another document or another section to figure out each time you have another functionality that you're describing, that they don't have to go through 10 different documents to figure out what does it mean, what does this functionality mean. Are you clear? Next, actor. Now, in a use case, remember what did we say? Somebody must interact with the system, right? Yes or no? Do all these features work by themselves? If I don't log into JCPenney, if I don't click on the sign in button, do you think the system will automatically sign me in? No. So I must interact with the system, correct? I must do something with the system for it to give me the next page or the next step, correct? So there's always an actor involved. We are building this system, this application for a particular user, right? Some features can be accessed by more than one kind of user. For example, if you are building that HR application may be used by employees, right? They may ask me as an employee to log into this HR application and enter my time or enter my social security number and fill out a form. So I am also interacting with this HR application, right? The HR folks, people working in that department are also they're also logging into their system and viewing my information. Yes or no? The managers, right, in my manager as well as the HR manager can also log into this HR application and view my information. So there are different kinds of actors, right? Whoever is using this system must be listed as an actor. Why? Because we want to tell the developer that this feature will be accessed by these groups of people. Are you clear? Okay. Once we listed the actors, now we must describe the process. You know how we describe the login process? So we must describe the process. That is called the flow of events. The flow of events can be broken down into two. We have the basic flow and the alternative flow. The basic flow is what Trishma described about the login process. Now, Trishma, if your mother has forgotten her password, or if she did fat fingered the password, right? There was a data entry error. Do you think the system will still let her log into her account?
No, it will not.
No, it will not. What should the system do when stuff like that happens? Those are alternative flows. These are also scenarios related to login functionality, correct? If you have typed in the wrong username or wrong password, that is also related to the login button, right? Login feature. Yes or no? That scenario? Now, is that part of your basic flow? No. Basically, we expect it to work, right? And in order for it to work, we expect everything to go right. However, alternatives can happen, right? Exceptions can happen. So, the flow of events, when we write flow of events, we must write both. The good case scenario, right? If everything goes well, what do we expect? And then, if something goes wrong, we must write down what are the things that can go wrong and how should the system or this feature react or interact with the user if any of these scenarios happen. And those are called the alternative flows. Are you clear? Now, once we've written our flow of events, we must write special requirements. Now look at it this way. Special requirements, right? Actually, let's talk about we'll come back to special requirements in a minute. And then preconditions. So in order for you to withdraw cash, right? Or make a payment, you must be logged into your bank account, right? Online bank account. In order for you to make a purchase on Amazon, you must be signed in, correct? So that is a precondition, right? In order for you to make a purchase, you must have funds in your account, right? Now you may have, let's say, $100 or $500 in your account. So the precondition that yes, you have money in your account has been met. However, the purchase that you're making for is for $800. Do you think the system will allow you? No. Why? Because there's a special requirement here, right? In this case, the requirement is that the amount that is in your account should exceed the amount that you're trying to make a payment for. Yes or no? Alright? So that is a special requirement. You fulfill the precondition, right? You do have money in your account. It's just that in addition to that, there is a special requirement in this case. Now, if the purchase was for $380 and you had $500 in your account, it will go through, right? It's only if your purchase is for more than what you have in your account that this scenario will fail. Yes, no, maybe. So do you understand the difference between special requirements and preconditions? Alright. Next, once this feature, once you've finished, right, the basic flow has been done and all the conditions have been met, what is the post condition? Where does it take you? So in the case of login, Krishma said that it takes us to our account homepage, right? You are logged in. That is your post condition. Prior to that, you were not. Now you are. Correct? Yes, no, maybe. Alright. Last, extension points. How many of you have withdrawn cash from the ATM machine? Krishma, how about you? Okay. I don't know if Shadab is there. Shadab, have you? So pretty much all of us, right? He's not here? Okay. So pretty much all of us have. Now, let me ask you this. We are working, we have a software, right? ATM machine has a software. Do you think the ATM machine knows how much money you have in your account, bank account? Will you be able to withdraw cash from any ATM machine in any part of the world or in any part of US? Let's stick to an American card. Do you think the information is stored in the ATM machine? No. Right? So what is happening? You are interacting with the ATM machine, but how did the ATM machine know how much money you have in your account? How do you think? The ATM machine talks to the bank. Okay? So, even though I'm building the ATM machine, I must build an extension. The ATM machine must also be able to communicate to the bank, right? Well, the ATM machine, let's say if you were driving from New York to Washington, D.C., right? And you withdrew some cash in New York, right? You withdrawn about $300 in New York. By the time you get to Washington, D.C., you want to withdraw another $300 and your daily limit is $500. Do you think the ATM machine in Washington, D.C. will allow you to withdraw $300? No. Right? Why? Because if your daily transaction limit, it's not Srinivas, it's not may not, it is definitely not. If your daily transaction limit is $500, then if you've already withdrawn $300 before, it will definitely not let you withdraw more than $200 in Washington, D.C. Okay? It does not matter where you are. Why? Because it's always talking to the bank. So even though I'm building a software for the ATM machine, there is an extension that this software talks to the bank. And that is the extension point. The ATM machine is getting the information from the bank. How much can you withdraw, right? Whether you have sufficient funds in your account or not, whether you have met your daily transaction limits or not. Are you clear? So when I describe withdraw cash, right, functionality, when I write the use case for that, do you think I should also list for the developer, how does the ATM machine know how much can I withdraw and whether I can or cannot? Yes, right? It's not as if I go to the ATM machine and say I want to withdraw $300 and it allows me to withdraw it, right? That's not how it goes. If I don't have the funds for it, it will not allow me to withdraw. If I don't have, if I've already exceeded my transaction limits, it will not allow me to withdraw. So I must list for the developer this extension, right? It's not just me interacting with the ATM machine, but the ATM machine also interacts with the bank. So there is an extension here. Are all of you clear so far? So these are the key components. When we write a use case, we must list these 8 components for sure. There can be more, mind you, right? Every template is different. Every company is different. However, these 8 components will always be there. These are the basics. Without these 8 things, your use case is incomplete. Are you clear so far? All right. When we say actor, who is an actor? Anybody that interacts, anybody or anything that interacts with the system is an actor. If it is an actual person, then it is a primary actor. Okay? If it is another system talking to the system that you are building, then it is a secondary actor. So in the case of our ATM machine example, the bank is talking to the software that you're building, which is the ATM software. So is it the ATM machine that is your secondary actor, or is it the bank that is your secondary actor? Bank. Alright? Remember, we can only have one system that we are building, one application. whatever application, whatever feature of the application that you are describing, that is the system, right? Anything else is an actor. If it is a real life person or group of people, then those are primary actors. If it is another system talking to the system that you are building, then the other system is the secondary actor. Now, can we guarantee that when you go to the gas station that you will always swipe the card the correct way, with the magnetic stripe in the correct direction? No. Can you always guarantee that you will only use the correct credit card or debit card while you're at the gas station? No. Can you always guarantee that when you are swiping this card, right, that you have to enter a PIN, that the PIN will always be correct? No. Can we guarantee that when the ATM machine talks to the bank, right, that the bank will always respond? The bank systems can be down, right? Can we guarantee the bank will give you a regular response all the time? No. So an actor is something that we do not have control over. And that is one of the reasons why we must list not only the basic flow but the alternative flows as well. Why? Because we want to take into consideration everything that can go wrong with these actors. Are you clear? Alright. How do we name actors? Remember, all of you are accessing the blog, right? I'm not going to name every one of you as an actor. All of you as a group are candidates, right? I have so many different batches. The way you interact with the blog is always the same, right? Irrespective of whether you were in the June batch or the August batch. So we group the people by their potential roles. Every role is an actor. Are you clear? Every role has the same kinds of rights and privileges. Okay? How do we find actors? Well, we simply ask a couple of questions. Who is going to use this feature, this system? Who is going to get information from this system? Right? Who is providing information to this system, the system that you are building? What other systems use this system? And lastly, who is going to be responsible for maintaining this system? Right? All of these, when you find out the answers, those are actors. Then you've got to be able to group them. Are they primary actors or secondary actors? Are you clear? Use cases can have relationships. Like for example, in the ATM machine, right? Do you do anything separately? Do you have to click a button that says validate daily transaction limit from bank? Do you have to click a button to initiate that conversation between the ATM machine and the bank? No. It happens automatically, right? So that is also a relationship if it happens automatically. On the other hand, have you come across certain applications where you have to fill out, are you a green card holder, a citizen, or whatever, or not? And if you say no, then you have to fill out an additional fields or additional paperwork. Yes or no? So did you have to do something different to complete that application? Yes. Right? It is not the same relationship as the one for the ATM machine, is it? There you did not have to do anything separate, anything unique, anything different. Right? Here you have to do something different. So there are relationships. And that is when we write all those extensions, right, we must include all the relationships so that the developer knows how to build it all. Okay? These relationships, when we write our use cases, you can't tell, you just list them. But when we elaborate our use cases with a diagram, then these relationships are indicated by using arrows. Alright? And typically the way the arrows are, if it is a solid line versus a dotted line, the shape of the arrowhead, notice? Different arrowhead here, different arrowhead here, right? So the shape of the arrowheads can tell you the relationship. But we will talk about the diagrams and the arrows in the UML class, okay? Today I just want you to know that use cases, because we are linking one use case to another, there can be times when we have relationships between use cases. Are you clear? Alright. Let's go back to our flow of events, right? When we are writing a flow of events, everything else is simple, right? Let's go back here. Where is it? Brief description, actors, right? This is the only place where you are writing down that entire piece, how this functionality works. So when you are writing your flow of events, correct? This flow of events can be written in a variety of different ways. And those are called formats. So the flow of events can be written in a narrative form. Right? If you were to just describe this functionality, what does it do and how? That is the narrative form. Another is if you know the narrative, of course you can leave it in narrative, but you can refine the narrative form by listing the step by step, the way Trishma did. First go here, click here, do this, do that, right? Step by step. That is called the scenario or the step-by-step format. And again, you can refine the narrative form by listing it in a conversation format. Conversation is, what does the user do? What does the system do? What does the user do next? What does the system do next? So conversation format, what's the difference between, or what does it mean? Narrative form is free form text. You just describe in your words, what is this functionality about? How does it work? Okay? You can do high level of detail really is up to you. How does it work? So we have one example here, right? Read through it. Now the level of detail can change. It is, like I said, it is up to you. What level of detail do you want to put into your use case? So this is the narrative form. There are many people, right, who will go into a meeting and this is how they will describe it. Of course, if you are smart, you will filter through all this information and understand how does it work step by step. But otherwise, you will simply take notes. Once you have this information, you're supposed to refine it. Okay? So this is one level of detail. Just look here. In this one here, we have more details. Okay? When you write in the narrative form, you have the if statements. You must specify. If this happens, then system should do this. You are not writing anything separately for main flow and alternative flow. It's all in one place in the narrative form. Are you clear so far? Scenario format. Scenarios are typically from the point of view of an actor. What does the actor do? What does the actor see? Okay? Or what does the actor know? So we will describe the sequence of events that we want this, to happen. Okay? Every statement, every step is a simple statement. There are no if or then statements here. This is what the actor will do. There is no if or then, which means that you will have to break down your use case into a main flow and your alternative flows. Alright? You will also write down what is the actor going to do and what is the system going to do. For example, here we're saying that the system will present the transaction screen, right? System will capture the fast cash withdrawal request made by the actor. It will post the transaction to the bank and receive a confirmation. And it will dispense money, card, and transaction receipt. Okay? Another one. So you want to register, right? You're registering at a website. User enters the registration information. Correct? We're writing down what are the required fields, what are the optional fields, right? Etc., etc. Remember, level of detail is up to you. Once you have filled out that registration form, what is the things that system does? Well, first and foremost, it checks. Remember, we have the confirm password field listed right here. Login ID, password, and confirmation password, right? So the first thing it does is it validates that the password matches the confirmation password. Once it validates that this is correct, then what does it validate next? That all the required fields are filled out. Yes or no? Once it validates that, then it verifies the customer activation information. Right? That yes, we can activate this customer. It creates and activates the customer online account and then shows you the registration information. Right? So we have all the things that the user did and all the things that the system is responsible for. Now once you've written down your basic flow, you will then write your alternative flows. Is everyone clear? Another form of writing your use case is the conversation format, right? Know how you look at the actors, right? We have the actor talking and the actress talking, the female lead and the male lead. He talks and then she talks and he talks and she talks. Same story here. We have the actor and the system. System does this, actor does this. System does this, actor does this. So instead of just listing all these sequence of events, irrespective of whether it was done by the actor or the system, what we are doing is we are breaking them down. We will have 2 columns. We will list everything that the user does and in one column, and everything that the application does in system does in the second column. Now while we're doing it, we still have the sequence. Okay? It's not as if we are killing the sequence. It's just that we are separating the 2 kinds. Are you clear? So ideally, you hear the narrative in your meetings. You should then analyze and write down your use cases in either the step-by-step format or the conversation format. However, there are no guarantees that you can't just leave it in the narrative form. Okay? So you can have 3 types of formats. You can have the narrative format, the step-by-step, and the conversation. All 3 are valid. Are you all clear so far? As I mentioned before, use cases vary in detail, right? Sometimes we write a very high-level use case, and then we go into dig down deeper into the details of it. It is up to you how you are writing your requirements. So, for example, I may write a very high-level use case of online, selling online, right? I can simply say, customer will go online, customer will select a product, a customer will add item to cart, the customer will check out, right? System will validate, system will do this, system will send a confirmation message that the order has been placed. At a very high level, I have described how the sell online feature works. Yes or no? Now, I can go into details of every functionality, not only on how to add items to cart, but to edit items in cart, right? I can go down to the level of detail where we're doing checkout. Yes or no? So you must figure out what is the appropriate level of detail for your users. What will help them understand? Remember, the whole purpose of UML was to be able to clarify your requirements in such a way that everyone can understand, right? That was how we said that we could improve our process. Yes, no, maybe, guys. Yes. Now remember, just because you've written your main flow doesn't mean that your use case is complete, correct? Or your flow of events is complete. No. Not unless you were writing it in the narrative form. If you have written your use case in the step-by-step scenario format or in the conversation format, then you must also specify your alternative paths. Correct? So alternatives, again, can have 2 subsets. There are variations and exceptions. So Srinivas, if you were trying to log in, how many times have you actually clicked on the login button after you filled out the username and password field? Do you typically click on the login button, or do you typically do something else? You hit the enter key, right? So, what does it mean? that it is a variation to this functionality, right? You can still sign in. It is another option. You are still signing in. It is not a different functionality. It is just one of the steps. You can do it in a variety of different ways. Yes or no? And because you can do a certain step in a variety of different ways, it is called a variation. Are you clear? On the other hand, if you have forgotten your password, right, then how should we expect the system to do? So if you hit the enter key, right, in a different way, if you try to log in a different way, then what did you expect the system to do? When you click on the enter key, do you expect it to log you in? Treat it as the same as clicking on the login button. If yes, you must let the developer know, correct? On the other hand, if you do something wrong, not different, but wrong, and how should the system respond in that case? That is not the same as the variation, is it? So the system response in case you do something wrong is called the exception scenarios. Alright? So when we list alternatives, we must list both where applicable. If there is a variation that is possible, then you must list, or you want it to be possible, then you must list that variation so that the developer knows that when you do this, it should treat this step the same as step 3 above. Absolutely. Alternative paths, alternative flows are of two kinds. They can be broken down into two kinds, variations and exceptions. Okay, Neha? Everyone clear between variations and exceptions? Let us look at some of the exceptions. Right? I'm sure all of you at some point of time or the other have applied for a loan. Correct? When we apply for a loan, and let's say we are applying online, system goes and identifies, are we a new customer? Do we already have an account with the bank or not? Correct? Then it identifies how much are we asking for in loan amount and what is our credit score. If everything is fine, it accepts our order, right? It accepts our loan application and approves it. Correct? Now what are the exceptions? Let's say your credit score is low. On the low end, 610, 620. However, you have been with the bank for the past 10, 15 years. Do you think the system will reject you outrightly? No. So what do you want the system to do? You must tell the developer. On the other hand, your credit score is also low and you have not been with the bank for more than maybe 6 months, or you are a new customer, do you think they will still entertain your loan application? Absolutely not, right? So in this instance, we want the developer to build the code in such a way that a different result is given, right? Lastly, everything is fine, but the bank can't give out. You're asking for too much money, right? You're asking for maybe 20 grand, 30 grand. It's not bank policy to give out a personal loan for that much. Have you heard of conditional approvals? If you ask for 20 grand, they approve you 15,000. Right? So that is another exception scenario, right? So it hasn't rejected you, it hasn't accepted you, it has given you a third option. These are the various exceptions that can happen, right? Now look at it. When are these various exceptions happening? When we are identifying the customer, right? If it is new or existing. So exceptions 1A, 1B, what does it mean? In both cases, your credit score is low, right? It does not matter. But the key is, are you a preferred customer or not? That is defined by how long have you been our existing customer, right? So when it identifies you as a customer, the first thing it does is it flags based on, oh, this is a customer, right? Are you a new customer or relatively new customer, or are you a preferred customer? Yes or no? And it is treating you per se, based on that you are a preferred customer, existing or preferred. Alright, so this is an exception that is happening. It's not a variation, it is an exception that is happening at this particular step. Are you clear? Alright. This is an example of a use case that has your main flow, basic flow, your variations as well as exceptions all in the same place. Have any of you tried to auto-activate your card, a credit card, online? So, what are the steps? You're supposed to fill out the registration information. The registration information you filled out, the card number and what is it that is all the name on the card and whatnot, right? Then system checks the password. Does a match? Password could be a PIN or whatever it is that you had, remember, for your card. Yes, no, maybe, guys. The password could also be your last 4 digits of your social security number, correct? So it matches your password and then it verifies the login ID uniqueness, right? So if you're creating a card, if you're activating it online, it makes sure that this is unique, that no one else is using this information, correct? Now, many a times, when you're entering the registration information, have you noticed that it can ask you for, if you're activating an account, it can ask you for an address or another reference card number, ATM card information to validate. So that's a variation, right? It is using that to confirm your registration information. Yes or no? Step 1. Same goes. It can also give you a challenge question. Yes or no? So both of these are part of, these are variations for step 1 of your registration information, correct? And hence, it is listed as a 1A and 1B. These variations do not apply to password match, correct? They're not matching your password, they're matching your registration information. Now look at exceptions. So registration information went through, right? But when you got to step 2, you typed in the wrong password. Then what is it that we want the system to do? We want the system to ask the user to try again, right? Now same, what if you've typed in the password wrong more than 3 times? What happens? The system will say you are logged out of your account, right? Please contact customer service to unlock your account. Yes, no, maybe. You can't just try indefinitely, right? You can't keep on trying and trying and trying. Different combinations of your password. How does the system know whether someone's trying to hack into your account or you are a valid user? Can it make the difference? No. So do you think these 2 exceptions apply to step number 2, or do you think they apply to step number 1 or 3 or whatever? Which one do you think they apply to? 2. So both of these are listed as 2A and 2B. Right? And then a third one is when you're trying to register, right? You're trying to do a registration and the login ID is not unique, right? Then system suggests an alternative, correct? So that is another exception. Is everyone clear so far? As I mentioned before, use cases can be related, right? Remember, we had preconditions. Precondition means that there is a dependency. In order for you to make a payment online, you must be logged into your online account. Yes or no? Can you make a payment from your online bank without logging into your account? No. So there is the first relationship that we must be aware of as far as use cases are concerned, is that of dependency. Precondition means dependency. Are you clear? Next, include relationship. If you must make an online payment, then you must automatically, that there must be sufficient funds to make that payment, right? So if you are trying to, for another example, this is the example that we talked about before. In order for you to withdraw cash, system must already go and check from the bank if you have enough funds to withdraw. Yes or no? So it must talk to the bank automatically. Must you do something different? Do you do anything different? No. Right? When you walk into a store, and let's say I gave you a gift card for $25, and the item is $30, do you do something different to check whether you can pay the, the entire amount, the entire purchase? Or does the system automatically say $5 remaining? It's automatic, right? So what does it mean? That in order to do one, the other piece, the other functionality happens automatically. It is included, it is part of this functionality. Okay? So if I'm trying to make a payment online, system automatically goes and validates that I have sufficient funds to make this payment. That's an auto feature. I don't have to do anything different for it. It is triggered automatically. And hence it is included. Are you clear? Next, when you are trying to make a payment, have you seen that there are two kinds of payments that we can make? A one-time payment as well as a recurring payment. Now, if I wanted to make a recurring payment, I'm still making a payment, right? But in order to make a recurring payment, do I have to fill out extra fields? So if I have to do something extra, then it is an extension. Another example. All of us use smartphones and even voice over IP. You know that, right? So there is a software. In the old telephones, I don't know how many of you use the old ones. Were you able to have call waiting on the old phones? The mechanical devices, not the ones that have software on it, but the old ones, no. So the new ones, right, that has call waiting. So what does call waiting mean? You are receiving multiple calls at the same time, correct? So irrespective of whether you are receiving one call or two, the functionality that you developed is receive a call, right? However, in order to receive for call waiting functionality to work, that is an extension of your receive a phone call. Yes or no? Because you must do something a little different to be able to receive that second call, correct? So that is an extend relationship. Extension. What else? Think of it. You make a phone call. You can talk to one person. When you make a conference call, that is also make a phone call. Yes or no? But do you have to do something extra to make that conference call? To have 3 people on the conference, you're making 3 calls at the same time and having all 3 of them on the same call, right? So it is still make a phone call, but is that an extra, are you doing an extra step to be able to have a conference call? Yes. Everyone clear between the difference between include and extend? Lastly, generalize. How many of you have watched James Bond movies? Or The Treasure Hunt, Nicolas Cage? Have you noticed all these actors in these movies, right? As required, they sometimes scan a badge. They sometimes do a retinal scan to enter that same building. They sometimes do a thumbprint, swipe a fingerprint to enter that building. Yes or no? They can also enter a password to open up that door, right? What does it mean? That it will take a password, right? You can either type in a password, or you can swipe your fingerprint, or you can do a retinal scan, or you can scan a badge, right? All of these four things, right, can be changed interchangeably, can be used interchangeably. It means the same thing. However, are the codes the same? Do you think the developer will write one code and all four can apply? Or will he have to write a different code for all these four different functionalities on how to read the retinal scan versus how to read a fingerprint swipe? It's four different codes, right? But they can be used interchangeably for the same thing. Yes or no? So these are four separate use cases. These are not variations. These are four separate use cases, correct? Different functionality. However, you can use either one of them. Are you clear, all of you? So these are the four relationships that you must be aware of. Now when we write our use case, remember, we are not just writing a flow of events with the basic flow and alternative flow. We must write all the key components, correct? So on this slide, I have an example of a complete use case that has everything. So who can call out what are the key components that you see here? Which ones do you remember? Guys, the screen is in front of you. Which one of these are the key components? Name and description. Use case name and description. Very nice. What else? There were 8 key components in all. So we have 2 so far. What are the remaining 6? Actors. Nehal, you're right. We also have the flow of events, the main flow and the basic flow, and the alternatives. The alternatives include the extensions and the variations and the exceptions. What else? We have already talked about variations. That's part of your flow of events. Guys, is the success end condition the same as your post condition? And how about the precondition? Look below. Do we have other information? Can that be kind of your special requirement depending on your use case? Yes. Okay? Now let's look at our main flow. Our main flow, our basic flow, is also called our happy path. It's also called normal flow. Okay? Now look at your main flow. Where do you see the main flow? Now this is what is wrong with our example here. Right? This is the template that I picked it up from. The template has description and description. What should this say? Instead of description, what should this say? It should say basic flow of events, right? Very nice. Which format is this use case written in? Is it narrative, step-by-step, or conversation? Steps. Very good. Extension points. Right? We also have the extensions, which is not the same thing as exceptions, right? Exceptions and variations are the alternatives. Are you clear? All right. Now, while we are here, let us look at your requirements document and the use case section in it. Here we are. So it's a different format, correct? Is it the same format that I have on my slide deck? No. However, if you notice, the information is pretty much the same, isn't it? Look, use case name, use case ID. Is that the same? Primary actors and secondary actors. So instead of just saying actors, we've broken it down. Still the same thing, isn't it? Listing all the actors that we have on our screen here. Notice? Yes, no, maybe. Next, use case description. Preconditions. Yes or no? Now what trigger? Trigger is something different here. It's not a key component, although it is listed on my on my example too. What is trigger? When does this use case begin? So the sign-in use case begins when the customer clicks on the sign-on link. Yes or no? The sign-on feature is initiated when a customer clicks on the sign-on link. Yes or no? Can it be initiated any other way? Can it be initiated when you open up an account or open up a browser? No. Can the checkout process initiate until you click on the checkout button? No. So what triggers it? What triggers this functionality? When you click on a certain link, when you answer a certain question, right? Or when you do a certain functionality. Yes or no? That is the trigger. All right? So trigger. Post conditions. We've talked about this, right? Success and criteria. If everything goes well, what should we be seeing? Then we have the normal path or our happy path. Notice it's called happy day scenario or happy path. Are you clear so far? This is your basic flow. Then you list your alternatives. Alternatives are two kinds, right? Exceptions and variations. Yes or no? So what will be here? This template says alternative in alternate flows. What should it really say? Variations, correct? That's right. Remember, every template, guys, will have something they expect the PMO manager, whatever term they use in their company, to put that information in. There are some companies that call the variations as alternatives, okay? But look at it this way, alternate and alternative, right? Confusing there. So you will list your variations here and your exceptions here. If there are any include relationships, you must write them down here. Special requirements. Did we have special requirements in our key components? An additional one is, did you make any assumptions when you were writing this use case? Well, the assumptions, again, you may leave it blank. Right? Just because it's there doesn't mean that you've got to fill it out. But if you have anything, put that in. Lastly, this, do you want to relate it to a particular functional requirement? If you do, then you can list it. Functional requirement 3.2. All right? Again, it's not a key component. Many companies will use the use case ID to list it, to associate it to a functional requirement. So however it works for your company, you must figure it out. Are you clear so far? So do you see how we have our use case section? All the key components that I had on my screen here, did you find them on your document? Even though if it is a different format, but everything is there, isn't it? Any questions? Guys, use cases are critical. You must know how to write use cases. Okay? You should not have any doubts regarding use cases and UML. So, and I know I've gone really nice and slow. We've spent, almost 3 hours on use cases, right? So I want all of you to be very confident of use cases. There are times when in an interview they may give you a functional requirement and say, well, can you give us the use case for it? Something very simple like sign on, right? Or add to cart or checkout or something. You should be able to logically put down your steps. Right? Say your use case name, right? The preconditions. You must give me a comprehensive answer. Don't just give me the flow of events. Are you clear? Now for today, I want you to write the use cases for these 4, functionalities. All right? Transfer money between 2 online accounts, banking accounts. Get money. right? That could be your ATM machine. Make payment, online payment. Set up vendors for automatic payment. You want to pay your electricity bill, your water bill online. So I want you to work on these use cases for today. If you have doubts, I want you to come back tomorrow and ask. Because once I teach you UML, your assignment for next week is going to be to write down the use cases and draw the diagrams for your case studies 1 through 4. Are you all clear so far? Everyone. All right. So I am going to, this brings us to an end to today's session, right? Use case.